Well, hey there guys, I'm Max LaBeast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. And we finally fixed the contact page, so you can send your questions through the contact page or email, same as always, like normal now. So, yeah, it should be working fine, so send your questions normally. Technical issues, no matter what it seems, because I have a different problem and I can't get my printer to work to give you a, little paper with a quote to read back from, so just read it off on the computer here, like I've done before. Alright, so, Chosen Hero 95 asks, who is your favorite companion in a Zelda game? I have the really unpopular answer here, which is Fi from Skyward Sword. I mean, there's a lot of issues with Fi, and I'm probably going to agree with, like, everyone that anyone's going to say in the comments, but, like, for me, my first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time, so I identified the helper character, like, which was Navi in that game, as a great source of information. That's what I thought of a helper character as being. And what I loved about Navi that I don't think, like Navi and Tattle from Majora's Mask and the N64 games in general, is that they were great sources of information. Like, you could learn about the enemies and stuff, and I thought that was great. And I was real disappointed that a lot of the other helpers, like Midna or Eslo, didn't like tell you about each enemy. And I don't know, I just very much missed that. And I really liked that Fi brought that back and was even more comprehensive, gave you a lot of information about the characters, the enemies. It was just a great information source with a lot of interesting tools, and I actually did like Fi's character design and part in the story, even if it was mishandled, so I just like Fi a lot. But, it's an unpopular answer, so, it's just all the 85% and the constant notifications. So, tell me yours in the comments. Alright, It's a Secret to Everybody asks, what is your favorite 2D Zelda game? Well, this is a little weird because, like, what I believe to be one of the best Zelda games, if not the best Zelda game, even if it's not my favorite, is A Link to the Past back on the Super Nintendo. I think that was a great game, and I think it's one of the best Zelda games of all time. The best. However, I think when it comes to a personal favorite, I might have to pick the Minish Cap, simply because I thought the game was gorgeous and it had a lot of cool ideas, and it reminded me of the 3D Zelda games in some respects, just with how it played. So that might be my pick, but it is a tough question because I do think A Link to the Past is a much better game. So, tell me yours in the comments. Hussein F asks, what do you think about playing Wind Waker HD in first person? I think it's clever. Well, this was basically the system that was in Skyward Sword, the ability to move and shoot in first person, and, some people have made a big deal about it being how it's like Ocarina of Time was originally intended to be first person, so it's like, oh my god, this is a big deal, but it's not really, it's a logical aiming mechanic for, shooting the bow and whatnot. Every 3D Zelda game has had first-person aiming as an option, if not the only aiming method. And just giving you the ability to move in it isn't really surprising to me, or the ability to just look in first person and move while just looking around. So it's just kind of the next logical step, and it's a nice bit of functionality to add in Wind Waker HD. It's definitely not like some big revolutionary thing. I mean, this isn't Zelda as an FPS. Well, it is sort of Zelda as an FPS, but it's not like changing the game. It's just adding a bit of functionality to something that was always there. So I don't think it's a big deal. But yeah. Darmanitan asks, do you think that having only one Zora, which happened to be a sage, in the Wind Waker was a good decision, especially since it takes place on an ocean? Well, that's always been a big topic of the debate. I mean, of course, there's the debate over whether the Rito were the Zoras evolved or not, which is, of course, it's factually proven that they are evolved Zoras. So that debate's over, thankfully. But in addition to that, like, people have always debated that. Like, why did they have a game set in the ocean and then they just took out the main water-dwelling race of the series? It does seem kind of odd. It's understandable why people would question that, but at the same time, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. First of all, there's the major plot hole it would have created, which is, if no one knows that Hyrule's down there under the ocean, like, well, how would that make any sense with the Zoras? Because they can just swim down there. So it was a necessary step just for the way the game was going to go, and how there's going to be that mystery. Unless you wanted the Zoras to be a really reclusive race where they knew more about what was going on or something, which could have been an interesting plot point, but it's not what happened in the Wind Waker. It was something that they had to do, and I also think it was interesting to take away a race that frankly would have been really powerful on that ocean. And, well, they still were very powerful. They were the only guys who could fly over, just like it was nothing. So they retained their power over the ocean in a lot of different ways, but they did something original with it, and I thought that was interesting. The only Zora that shows up is dead. It's not like there's a Zora in the Wind Waker. It's a ghost from probably before there were Rito. So I don't think it's that significant. It's in keeping with the fact that there just weren't no Zora. Alec7 asks, "Hey Axel, how would you feel if Nintendo used Link's design for Super Smash Bros. For Wii U in Zelda Wii U?" You know, like, this is a bit of an odd one for me as well, because when I saw that design for Super Smash Bros., I kind of thought it was going to be I mean, it looks like it was an intentional combination of kind of like the Skyward Sword Twilight Princess looks. It's got a bit of the stylization you see in Skyward Sword, and he's clearly got his own hairstyle thing going on. He's Link, clearly being careful with his looks. But it is kind of really close to Twilight Princess Link's outfit, and I think that that was their intent. They were trying to do a combination of some really popular Link looks, make it feel a little modern fitting, but they were also trying to do something a little new, a little, you know, just between the styles. And with Zelda Wii U, I still believe it's going to be something like with the detail of Twilight Princess, but more of the color, the bright colors of something like Ocarina of Time 3D. And this Link design is kind of in keeping with that. So honestly, I just think that this Link is going to be similar to what we see in Zelda Wii U anyway. As for them recycling this specific look, they very well could. Maybe that was even their intent. I can't know that, though. But unless it was designed with that in mind, I would like them to just make a Link that fits the look and feel and like the personality and character he's going to have for that game, and not necessarily stress that they have to use the one from Smash Brothers. Again, unless they design them both together, and that was the whole idea. I don't know. But, yeah. Soroa Link asks, "Why do fans like Dark Link a lot?" Well, haven't you ever thought of what you might look like as an evil Dark Shadow summon spell thing? I haven't either. Well, anyway, I don't know, like, I've never been too into Dark Link. I mean, it's a cool idea, I guess. You know, you fight your evil double. It's a kind of an epic challenge. It's a test against yourself, and there's a lot of different fantasy aspects that are really cool there. So I think a lot of fans just like Dark Link because he's like Link being tested against himself, fighting someone like himself. And it accomplishes a couple cool moments for players, like fighting against a duel against an equal opponent, kind of, sort of, instead of just fighting these giant monsters all the time, but in some cases, weaker monsters sometimes. So that's that, and it's also the idea of there being like a dark version of the main character. I think people will greatly like the main character, and seeing a different version of that character can be kind of interesting sometimes. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. But like I said, I can't give you the best answer because I've never been too into Dark Link, but you know, it's a cool, very cool moment in the games where he does appear usually, especially in Ocarina of Time, so. Eduardo Espinoza asks, "In Zelda there are many different races like Kokiri, Zora, Goron, Hylian, and all have evolved, but in Twilight Princess there are the Oocca. What do you think they evolved from or into?" Well, you know, like, I guess you could say that a lot of the Zelda races have evolved. They've obviously evolved and adapted into their own worlds, but honestly, most of them don't really have much racial connection at all. I mean, really, one of the only real examples we've seen where that's directly talked about was in the Wind Waker with the Koroks evolved from the Kokiri, and the Rito evolved from the Zora. Both of those have actual magical reasons, practically, or to a point, like the Rito getting their wings from the blue scales and the Deku Tree just being a magic tree in general. So, you know, like, there isn't a lot of lore explaining how these races evolve, so you're not really correct there. And I think things like the Oocca, we have no idea what their, like, racial evolutionary lineage is, or, like, we have no information on that, and it's not really relevant. Like, as far, like, if you're talking about racial connections like Wind Wakers, there really aren't very many of those. I mean, there might be a few other examples, but really, I think that a lot of Zelda fans get a little too caught up in that, trying to make all these connections where, like, why would there be? I mean, they're separate elements. They don't need to be connected, so it seems a little silly to draw all these theories where all these races must be evolved from each other, just because they're different time periods. I mean, the Zelda series constantly creates new races, and they're really always supposed to be separate elements, so, I don't know. There's just not that much evolution in this series. Zant's Helmet, hate those things, shame on you, asks, "What is your opinion on Ben Drowned? I think it's a good, scary story, but that's about it." Well said. Question Mark asks, "Would you mind seeing another game set in Termina, but with a different Link and a new layout of the world with no Majora? Expanding on the lore of Termina seems like a good idea to me." Well, you know, I've talked a lot about how I don't want to see a sequel to Majora's Mask, really. I don't want them to talk about all those mysteries in the game, and, because the big cool thing about the game was how mysterious it was. I think answering a lot of those questions would just ruin that atmosphere. However, another game set in Termina isn't a bad idea, as long as it doesn't touch on all of the plot details of, you know, Majora's Mask. If there was another game set in Termina, it needs to have a different story and not be all, like, explain what the Fierce Deity is, explain what Majora is, because it ruins the mystery. but it still has a world that has a lot of cool things you expand, and especially, you could play on the alternate world idea and have it be like alternate versions of other Zelda games taking place at the same time parallel to those. Or get to see Link's parallel in Termina. There's a lot of cool things you can do there. So I'm actually not opposed to another game set in Termina, because there's a lot of potential. I just don't want a sequel to Majora's Mask and its storyline. Alright, last question. Icon asks, would you like to see Gasha Seeds return to a 3D game? I thought they were really neat and well fleshed out, and had a well fleshed out system. I actually wasn't crazy about the Gasha Seeds. I don't know, it was a cute idea, but I wasn't really too crazy about, you know, placing seeds, waiting a while and doing other interesting things, and then coming back and, like, getting a ring or something. I don't know, like, it wasn't a bad system, but I don't, like, it's not something I think of when I think about how great the Oracle games were or anything. When I think about that, I think about the rings, which I freaking awesome, but not the Gasha Seeds. However, yeah, they could appear again. It was a cool idea, you know, you plant them, and they respond to certain things you do in the game, and it's a way of generating collectible. But I think that that's the key thing. You need to have the collectible. I mean, yeah, you can get rupees from them, but if there's not something you're kind of seeking, or you're using them as a method to get something in particular, I think it's a little, I don't know, a little underwhelming, and it kind of defeats the point of the system. That was one of the great ways of getting random rings in the game, and I think you'd have to have a collectible like that. Preferably something really meaningful like the rings, where you can customize things and get new stats. And doing something like that, that would make it great. I think I would love to see a means like that to get those again in another game, as long as they had a collectible that befitted. Alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the contact information, finally, in the description, and I'll see you guys later.